Before we dive into this wild ride, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Whether it's a cozy neighborhood street in Texas, a bustling high-rise in Chicago, or a tranquil mountain retreat in Colorado. I love hearing just how far these Karen tales of chaos and karma can travel. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the quiet suburban street, where perfectly manicured lawns stretched like emerald carpets beneath an endless blue sky. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the towering oak tree that stood proudly in the center of Jake's yard, its broad branches swaying rhythmically, whispering secrets to the waking world. The air smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass and blooming honeysuckle, while distant birdsong provided a soothing soundtrack to the peaceful dawn. Jake, a 38-year-old man with a calm but confident demeanor, stood barefoot at the base of his beloved tree, his calloused hands running along the rough bark. His eyes softened as he traced the grooves and knots, as if reading an old friend's face. This tree wasn't just wood and leaves to him. It was a living monument to years of patience and care, a symbol of stability in his otherwise unpredictable life. He inhaled deeply, savoring the earthy scent, feeling the sun's warmth on his skin. But the serene morning was about to shatter. From the corner of Jake's eye, movement caught his attention. Two figures striding purposefully down the sidewalk, their bright floral dresses clashing wildly with the muted greens and browns of the neighborhood. The women were unmistakable. Patricia and Cheryl, the infamous Karen sisters of the cul-de-sac, both in their mid-40s with heavy frames and loud voices that had become a thorn in Jake's side over the past year. Patricia's face was set in a grim, furious scowl, her eyes sharp with a simmering rage. She gripped a running chainsaw tightly with both hands, the machine's low growl a harsh contrast to the gentle rustle of the morning breeze. Beside her, Cheryl shouted with anger, her voice echoing off the neighboring houses as she gestured wildly at Jake's tree. Their floral patterns clashed with their aggressive postures, making them look like two storm clouds about to release a torrent of chaos on the peaceful street. Jake's heart thumped rapidly in his chest. He felt a rush of adrenaline and disbelief. How could they be here again? How could anyone so brazenly threaten to destroy something that meant so much to him? He swallowed hard, his mind racing for a way to stop this before things spiraled out of control. Patricia didn't waste a moment. She revved the chainsaw louder, the blade whirring threateningly as she stepped toward the trunk. Cheryl's voice rose to a shrill yell. That tree's a menace. It blocks our view, ruins our property value, and it's been nothing but trouble since day one. You're lucky we haven't called the city on you yet. Jake took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing knot of anxiety in his gut. Look, Patricia, Cheryl, this tree's been here long before either of you moved in. It's healthy and strong, and it's part of what makes this neighborhood beautiful. Maybe we can find a compromise. Cheryl cut him off with a sarcastic laugh. Compromise? Like you ever listen? You and your stupid tree obsession. Maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson about priorities. Jake felt a surge of anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. His years of dealing with entitlement had taught him that yelling back only made things worse. Still, seeing Patricia's fingers twitch on the chainsaw's trigger made his stomach churn. You're not seriously going to do this, Jake said, stepping in front of the tree protectively. Cutting down this tree isn't just vandalism, it's illegal. You could get in serious trouble. Patricia's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, her fury flickered with doubt. But it quickly returned as she tightened her grip and shifted the chainsaw toward the trunk. Watch me. Before Jake could react, the chainsaw bit into the bark, the harsh screech of metal on wood tearing through the morning air. Sawdust exploded in clouds around the sisters' feet. Jake's pulse hammered in his ears as he tried to block out the chaos, focusing on the tree as deep cracks began to spread through its trunk. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Jake's voice cracked as he shouted, "Stop. Please stop." Branches creaked and groaned as the massive tree began its slow, inevitable fall. The sisters stepped back, still shouting at Jake, but their victory was short-lived. The tree didn't topple onto the empty yard as planned. Instead, it veered sharply, as if guided by fate itself, and crashed squarely onto their sleek black convertible parked just beyond the curb. The windshield exploded in a shower of glass shards, metal crumpling beneath the heavy weight. leaves and branches scattered across the grass, while the air filled with the sharp scent of crushed foliage and hot engine. The noise echoed through the street like a gunshot. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, Cheryl's horrified scream pierced the air. Patricia stared in disbelief, her hands loosening on the chainsaw as she took a step toward the wreckage. Jake's mouth twisted into a slow, knowing smile. Justice, it seemed, had an impeccable sense of timing. "Looks like your view just got a little obstructed," Jake said quietly, his voice steady but laced with irony. The sisters exchanged shocked glances, their fury replaced by stunned disbelief. Patricia's jaw clenched tightly. "You'll regret this," she hissed, but the fire in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by something closer to fear. Jake took a step back, still keeping his gaze fixed on the damaged car and the fallen tree. Around them, neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Phones appeared, cameras clicked, and whispers of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Patricia wiped sweat from her brow, her breath heavy and ragged. "This isn't over," she spat, casting a venomous glance at Jake. "You have no idea what you're messing with." Jake shrugged, his confidence unwavering. "I think I have a pretty good idea." As the sisters retreated toward their house, still muttering threats, Jake turned back to his yard. The morning sun caught the jagged edges of the broken branches, casting sharp shadows across the grass. The tree he had nurtured for years lay fallen, but undefeated in his heart. The air was thick with tension, a mix of satisfaction and foreboding. This wasn't just about a tree anymore. It was about standing up to entitlement, about defending what mattered in a world that often seemed eager to destroy it. Jake's mind raced with possibilities. This confrontation was only the beginning. The Karen sisters had made a grave mistake, and he was already plotting his next move. The crowd lingered, some nodding in support, others watching with wide eyes. The street had changed in those few minutes. A quiet cul-de-sac had become a battleground of wills, a place where one man's calm resolve met two women's furious arrogance head-on. Jake looked once more at the wreckage, inhaling deeply the scent of crushed leaves and gasoline. The day was far from over, and somewhere deep inside, a spark of determination ignited. As the sun climbed higher, the quiet before the storm stretched thin, a tense, fragile silence waiting for the next move. And Jake was ready. The air hung heavy with tension as Patricia and Cheryl stormed back into their house, slamming the door behind them with a force that rattled the windows. Their floral dresses were streaked with dust and flecks of bark, but their faces burned with a mixture of fury and humiliation. Jake stood silently outside, surveying the wreckage, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos the sisters had left behind. The black convertible was a twisted testament to their recklessness. The hood was crumpled like paper, glass fragments glittered like shattered diamonds across the dashboard, and branches sprawled in disarray across the seats and floor. The sharp scent of crushed leaves mingled with the faint but unmistakable tang of gasoline, a reminder of just how close disaster had come. Jake wiped a bead of sweat from his brow and took a slow breath, steadying himself. He knew the storm was far from over. Patricia and Cheryl's fury wouldn't just simmer down and vanish. They would fight back, and they would do so with the same entitlement that had driven them to cut down his tree in the first place. As neighbors began to gather, drawn by the noise and commotion, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Whispers of "Did you see that?" and "I can't believe she actually did it" filled the air. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others exchanged knowing glances. Jake's quiet dignity had already begun to earn silent respect. Then the front door of the sisters' house burst open again. Patricia emerged first, her face flushed and her eyes blazing with fury. Cheryl followed, her hands planted firmly on her hips, her mouth twisted into a sneer. "We'll see how you like it when the law comes knocking, Jake," Patricia spat, her voice low but venomous. "You think you can just destroy our property and get away with it?" Jake met her gaze evenly, the hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Your property was the one destroying mine. Funny how karma works." Cheryl scoffed. "You don't scare us. We've got friends in high places, and we're not afraid to use them. This little stunt? You're going to regret it." The crowd around them shifted uneasily. Jake recognized the sisters' bluff for what it was: loud threats wrapped in fragile ego. But their arrogance was potent, fueled by a lifetime of getting their way through noise and intimidation. "Look," Jake said, his voice steady but firm, "I'm willing to talk this out. Maybe we can find a way to fix what's been broken." Patricia laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the tension. "Fix it? You expect us to fix our car after you wrecked it with your stupid tree? You're delusional." Her words sparked a ripple of murmurs from the neighbors, some shaking their heads at the sisters' blatant disregard for responsibility. Jake took mental notes of the growing divide in the street, a subtle but powerful shift in the neighborhood's mood. As the sisters turned to retreat, Cheryl glanced back, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You haven't heard the last of this, Jake. We'll be back, and next time you won't be so lucky." Jake's smile faded, replaced by a hard edge of determination. "I'll be ready." The sisters disappeared inside, slamming the door once more. Jake took a moment to absorb the charged atmosphere, aware that this confrontation was merely the beginning. The entitlement and arrogance that had driven Patricia and Cheryl were not going away quietly. They were poised for a battle that would stretch far beyond a fallen tree and a damaged car. Later that afternoon, as Jake cleaned up branches and debris from his yard, his mind raced with strategies. His peaceful life had been disrupted, but he refused to back down. The sisters' threats only fueled his resolve. Neighbors approached cautiously, offering quiet words of encouragement and sympathy. A few asked questions, eager to understand the full story behind the dramatic scene they had witnessed. Jake answered patiently, weaving the details together with sharp wit and a touch of sarcasm, keeping the mood light despite the seriousness of the situation. One neighbor, Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down, shook her head in disbelief. "Those sisters have always been trouble," she murmured. "I'm glad you stood your ground, Jake." Jake nodded, appreciating the support, but knowing that public opinion alone wouldn't be enough to stop Patricia and Cheryl. They were entitled, loud, and stubborn, traits that often shielded them from consequences. That evening, Jake reviewed footage from a security camera he had installed months earlier after a previous run-in with the sisters. The camera angle captured the entire front yard and street, recording every moment of the morning's chaos in crisp detail. Watching the footage, Jake's lips curled into a sly grin. The sisters had been caught in the act, Patricia wielding the chainsaw with reckless abandon, Cheryl yelling insults, and the trees fall clearly visible, crushing the convertible. The video was undeniable evidence of their wrongdoing. An idea began to take shape in Jake's mind, a way to turn the tables and expose the sisters' entitlement to the entire neighborhood, maybe even beyond. The next day, Jake edited the footage into a short video, adding sarcastic captions and a catchy soundtrack that highlighted the absurdity of the situation. He uploaded it to social media, sharing it in local groups and tagging neighbors who had witnessed the incident. Almost immediately, the video gained traction. Shares and comments multiplied rapidly. People were entertained and outraged in equal measure, amused by Jake's wit and shocked by the sisters' blatant disregard for property and community norms. Patricia and Cheryl's faces became public spectacle overnight, their actions dissected and ridiculed online. The sisters tried desperately to suppress the spread, sending messages demanding the video be taken down, threatening legal action, and even confronting neighbors who shared the post. But the damage was done. The sisters' carefully curated reputations were unraveling in real time, stripped bare by viral exposure. Jake watched with satisfaction as the neighborhood rallied behind him. Support poured in from unexpected places. Local news outlets reached out for interviews, and even the Homeowners Association began to take notice. Despite the growing pressure, Patricia and Cheryl refused to admit fault. Their pride, once a source of strength, now became a glaring weakness. They lashed out in frustration, their entitlement morphing into desperation. Jake recognized the sisters' obsession with appearances as their Achilles heel. Their sleek black convertible was not just a car. It was a symbol of status and power, a fragile facade that had been shattered both literally and figuratively. Using this knowledge, Jake began collaborating with a local arborist and legal advisor, gathering professional assessments of the tree's health and the legality of the sisters' actions. He prepared to take the fight beyond social media, turning evidence into action. The sisters, meanwhile, grew increasingly erratic. Their arguments at neighborhood meetings became louder and less coherent, their threats more empty as their isolation deepened. Yet, through it all, Jake remained composed. He knew the battle was as much about perception and strategy as it was about right and wrong. Late one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake stood on his porch, watching the silhouettes of Patricia and Cheryl pacing anxiously behind drawn curtains. The quiet determination in his chest burned bright. This was more than a property dispute. It was a test of will, of justice, and of karma. And Jake was ready to see it through. The night held its breath, waiting for the next move in a game that had only just begun. The suburban street was no longer just a place of calm mornings and friendly waves. It had become a stage for reckoning. As Jake turned inside, the faint glow of his phone screen illuminated a message notification. A neighbor had just sent a link to a local news article about the viral video. The story was spreading, and Jake knew that the Karen sisters' world was about to get a lot smaller. But how they would respond next remained a mystery, hanging in the balance like the quiet before a storm. The days that followed unfolded like a slow-burning fuse, each moment tightening the tension that had gripped the neighborhood since the morning the tree fell. Jake watched from his porch as whispers turned into conversations, and conversations blossomed into outrage. The viral video he had shared was no longer just a local sensation. It had captured the attention of the Homeowners Association and even a small local news crew. Patricia and Cheryl found themselves isolated, their once commanding presence reduced to hurried phone calls behind closed doors and nervous glances over their shoulders. The floral dresses that had once marked them as boisterous queens of the cul-de-sac now seemed like fragile armor against an invisible tide of judgment. One evening, a summons arrived, official notice from the HOA and City Council that a hearing would be held to address the illegal tree cutting and the damage to property. The sisters' faces drained of color as they read the documents, realizing that this confrontation was no longer something they could intimidate or yell their way out of. The day of the hearing arrived under a slate-gray sky, the weather a grim reflection of the mood swirling around the community center. Neighbors packed the room, their eyes fixed on the two women whose arrogance had ignited months of turmoil. Jake sat quietly near the front, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the agitated energy emanating from Patricia and Cheryl. When it was their turn to speak, the sisters tried their usual tactics: loud accusations, blame-shifting, and dramatic pleas. Patricia's voice quivered as she insisted the tree was a hazard to their property, and that Jake was the real problem, not them. Cheryl chimed in with exaggerated claims of financial loss, painting themselves as the victims of an unprovoked attack. But Jake had come prepared. He presented the security footage, the arborist report affirming the tree's health, and the legal assessments clearly outlining the sisters' violations. His voice was steady, tinged with a quiet authority that seemed to silence the room. The neighbors murmured their approval, some nodding, others capturing the moment on their phones. Patricia's jaw tightened, her eyes darting as the weight of evidence crushed her feeble defenses. Cheryl's fists clenched so tightly her knuckles whitened. The sisters' threats of legal retaliation fell flat against the cold facts laid bare for all to see. When the hearing concluded, the decision was unanimous. The sisters were ordered to pay fines, cover the cost of repairs, and replant new trees as restitution for their reckless actions. The HOA board chairman's words echoed in the room, emphasizing community, responsibility, and respect for shared spaces. Outside, the sisters refused to speak to the gathered crowd. Their sleek black convertible remained parked nearby, its damaged hood a daily reminder of their folly. Insurance companies had already been informed of the incident, and whispers spread that their claims were being questioned due to the clear evidence of negligence. Jake walked past the car slowly, the crushed branches still tangled on the windshield. He felt no joy in the destruction, but a deep satisfaction in the justice that had finally been served. The convertible was more than a car. It was a symbol of the sisters' pride and entitlement. Now, irreparably marred. Back at home, Jake's yard was quiet again. A young sapling had been planted where the mighty oak once stood, its slender trunk swaying gently in the breeze. Jake knelt beside it, planting his hands in the soil, feeling a hopeful connection to the future. But the story wasn't over. Rumors began to circulate that Patricia and Cheryl were considering escalating the fight, threatening lawsuits and retaliation. Yet their bravado seemed fragile now, undercut by public scrutiny and the tangible consequences of their actions. Jake knew he had to stay vigilant. Victory was not just about winning the hearing or gaining neighborhood support. It was about ensuring respect for boundaries, for nature, and for common decency. One afternoon, as Jake mowed his lawn, a car pulled up beside him. It was Mrs. Henderson, carrying freshly baked cookies and a warm smile. "You handled everything with such grace," she said, handing him the plate. "Not many would stand up like you did." Jake smiled back, accepting the gesture with quiet gratitude. "Sometimes," he replied, "you have to let the world see who you really are and hope the truth is loud enough to drown out the noise." That evening, Jake sat by his window, scrolling through messages and comments from neighbors and strangers alike. Stories poured in, tales of entitlement, of petty battles, of standing firm against injustice. His own story had sparked a conversation far bigger than a fallen tree or a damaged car. Just then, his phone buzzed with a notification, a new post in the neighborhood group. It was a photo of a small sapling planted right next to an ominous, freshly cut stump on Patricia and Cheryl's property. The caption read, "Sometimes the roots of karma run deeper than we think." Jake's lips curled into a knowing smile. The sisters' world was changing piece by piece, branch by branch. Yet, as the night deepened, an unmistakable chill crept through the air, an unspoken reminder that karma, while patient, could be relentless. The suburban street had settled once more into quiet, but beneath the surface, a tension lingered, like the final notes of a song before the silence. Jake glanced toward the window, eyes sharp and ready. Whatever came next, he was prepared.